Chapter 2433, Foundations Revealed One After Another. Chapter 2433, Foundations Revealed One After Another. Nine Dragons Emperor responded to Shifeng's statement with a hateful glare. The Force Zero Wing had mobilized had sent Twilight City on high alert. How could this be interpreted as anything other than an interruption? Moreover, Shifeng's grand arrival had ruined Nine Dragons Emperor's efforts to interest his guild members in a partnership with mythology. Not only had Zero Wing's show of strength shocked the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's members, but it had chased away any thoughts about mythology. "No, you haven't interrupted us," guild leader Black Flame. "You're right on time," Phoenix Rain said, a rare smile gracing her lips at Shifeng's greeting. She then turned toward Cold Shadow and firmly stated, "Vice Guild Leader Shadow, although I am very interested in a partnership with mythology, I'm afraid that I cannot sell Candlelight's shares." When Phoenix Rain rejected mythology's offer, silence filled the plaza. Every member of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion turned to stare at Phoenix Rain, complex emotions flashing in their eyes. Surprisingly, however, no one stepped up to object. If she had rejected mythology's offer earlier, they would have fought her decision as illogical and doubted her ability to act as a pavilion master, but with Zero Wing's 3 flying ships before them, no one could find a reason to argue with her decision. They were talking about flying ships, and it was clear that Zero Wing had some method to secure multiple ships. Now that Zero Wing ruled the skies, no superpower would dare offend the guild. With Zero Wing's help, the Dragon Phoenix could ensure the safety of its transportation routes in the future. In fact, the pavilion could even rely on Zero Wing's reputation to secure even more sea zones, which they could develop, and in turn, fuel the guild's growth. However, if Phoenix Rain sold her shares of the Candlelight trading firm to mythology, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion would likely lose Zero Wing's assistance. The difference between an ally with shares and one without was massive, after all. Furthermore, everyone knew how stingy Zero Wing was with its shares. If Phoenix Rain sold Candlelight's shares without Zero Wing's consent, no one would be surprised if Zero Wing became an enemy. "Rain, you should think this through carefully. You are aware of the guild's situation in the Apocalypse Empire. Many otherworld powers have already begun to set their sights on our guild, and you know better than I why we took the risk of transferring Twilight City to the Dawn Ridge," Nine Dragons Emperor loudly proclaimed when none of his guildmates spoke up. "If we can form a partnership with mythology and obtain combat runes, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion can quickly establish a foothold in level 100 neutral maps. With the resources and equipment we can acquire from those maps, we'll be able to stabilize our position in the Empire. Are you really willing to throw this opportunity away?" Before Zero Wing's flying ships had arrived, he had merely hoped to reduce Phoenix Rain's popularity within the pavilion, but now, he steeled himself to tear her from Zero Wing, no matter what it took. Phoenix Rain and Zero Wing had become firm allies long ago. Zero Wing's strength was Phoenix Rain's strength. But mythology was a different story. The potential alliance with mythology might drastically elevate Phoenix Rain's position, but it would be temporary. Mythology wasn't interested in a partnership with Phoenix Rain specifically, it wanted an alliance with the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. This would leave room for him to take advantage of plenty of opportunities, but if she stuck with Zero Wing, he'd have nothing. Fortunately, mythology had offered something that the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion urgently needed. There was no way the Grand Elders could ignore the temptation of mythology's combat runes. Although the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion was a super first-rate guild, its strength was only considered average among the many superpowers in God's domain. Now powers from the various otherworlds had begun to invade the main continent, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's position in the game was under threat. To alleviate some of the pressure the guild faced, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion had decided to gamble and transfer Twilight City, the guild's strongest city, to Dawn Ridge to secure its hold over the neighboring level 100 neutral map. However, the other superpowers in the Apocalypse Empire weren't idiots. They had also invested plenty of resources and stationed their players in the Dawn Ridge. If the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion had a powerful tool like the combat runes, it would have a much easier time exploring level 100 neutral maps. This was the Grand Elder's ultimate goal. Hearing Nine Dragons Emperor's comment, several nearby Grand Elders frowned and turned toward Phoenix Rain, their expressions hinting that she needed to make her decision carefully. The combat runes would be significantly helpful when the guild's members explored level 100 neutral maps. The benefits these combat runes offered were just as impactful as Zero Wing's flying ships could be. In fact, the combat runes might be even more beneficial to the guild. Zero Wing owned those flying ships, after all, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion did not. Moreover, rejecting Cold Shadow's offer would be on par with slapping Mythology in the face. Mythology was one of the virtual gaming world's 5 great super guilds, and it had already shown the Pavilion a lot of respect by approaching the smaller guild for an alliance. If the Pavilion rejected Mythology, the super guild would offer nothing. It might even move against the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. Although Mythology was focused on its development on the Western continent, it was still one of the 5 great super guilds. Causing trouble for the Pavilion would be child's play. Phoenix Rain's expression turned grim. She had never expected Nine Dragons' Emperor to pander to the guild's Grand Elders after failing to rouse their guildmates. The Grand Elders didn't normally meddle in the competition for the position of Grand Pavilion Master, but they were from the same generation as Ku Rong. Their influence in the guild couldn't be underestimated. Even Ku Rong had to weigh their words carefully. What a smart move. It's no wonder how he maintained his hold on the Black Dragon Empire in the past. Many planar passages were connected to the Black Dragon Empire, which led to intense competition in the empire. Normally, only super guilds were confident in stopping so many otherworld powers from invading, but during Shifeng's previous life, Nine Dragons Emperor's branch guild in the Black Dragon Empire had successfully defended the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's territories, only losing insignificant sections. Don't be in such a hurry to reject my offer, Phoenix Pavilion Master. Mythology is sincerely interested in an alliance. If we can negotiate a partnership, I can even speak with my guild leader about selling some of our Tier 3 combat runes to the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. Tier 3 combat runes will grant the Pavilion an absolute advantage when exploring level 100 neutral maps, Cold Shadow said sweetly, smiling. As she spoke, she glanced at Shifeng. Cold Shadow was familiar with the predicament the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion found itself in. As long as she could purchase Candlelight's shares, she didn't mind letting Nine Dragons Emperor borrow her power to suppress Phoenix Rain. Naturally, Zero Wing couldn't hope to compete with the terms Mythology could offer. When Cold Shadow finished speaking, the nearby Grand Elders watched with bated breath. Although they didn't know much about the Western continent, they knew a thing or two about Tier 3 combat runes. Only 3 super guilds were capable of producing the tools, and they didn't sell them to outsiders. If the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's Tier 3 experts could equip Tier 3 combat runes, then the guild would be unstoppable in the Hill of Ruins, the level 100 neutral map neighboring the Dawn Ridge. Moreover, these combat runes would ensure that the Pavilion had an easier time developing its navy. Just as the several Grand Elders were about to step forward to persuade Phoenix Rain, Shifeng retrieved an ancient magic array scroll from his bag and handed it to her. The moment Shifeng revealed the scroll, it drew everyone's gaze. The magic array scroll's mana was extraordinarily dense, nothing like the scrolls players typically saw. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. This is the sample of what we spoke about earlier. If you find it acceptable, we can negotiate prices, Shifeng calmly stated as he gestured to the magic array scroll now in Phoenix Rain's hand. Cold Shadow only grinned at Shifeng's play. She found it simply laughable that he wanted to use a magic array scroll to compete with her guild's Tier 3 combat runes. However, when one of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's Grand Elders, who possessed a master-ranked appraisal skill, curiously appraised the scroll, he couldn't help but gasp. An advanced, ancient barrier scroll? Chapter 2434, Ascending to Heaven. Chapter 2434, Ascending to Heaven. When they heard the Grand Elder's exclamation, everyone stared at the scroll Phoenix Rain held, astonished. Zero Wing is actually selling such an item? Magic barrier scrolls were insanely rare on the market. The various powers even hoarded basic magic barrier scrolls, only allowing their main forces access to the tools. Level 100 plus Grand Lords were simply too difficult to deal with for current players. If one of these Grand Lords possessed special skills, not even Tier 3 MTS would be able to tank it, let alone Tier 2 MTS. To help their main forces explore level 100 neutral maps, The various powers relied on magic barriers to defeat these level 100+ Grand Lords. Unfortunately, due to how scarce these scrolls were, the various powers didn't even have enough to arm their main forces sufficiently. As a result, the team's exploration speed was still quite slow. The best magic barrier scrolls on the market were only intermediate rank. There were practically never advanced magic barrier scrolls available. Although the various superpowers had even offered to trade level 100 dark gold equipment for the advanced ranked scrolls, no one was willing to sell what they had. And yet, not only had Shifeng revealed an advanced magic barrier scroll, but it was also an ancient barrier scroll. In God's domain, intermediate magic arrays could only affect level 100+ Grand Lords. They were nearly useless against level 100 mythics. Only advanced magic arrays would prove effective against such high-ranked monsters. With a complete set of advanced magic barrier scrolls, one could even slay a level 100+ mythic monster. It was easy to imagine how much a set of those scrolls was worth. Ancient magic arrays were generally stronger than ordinary magic arrays of the same rank, and fewer players were required to channel the magic arrays. This allowed more of the team to participate in the actual fight. If a team used an advanced magic barrier, they'd still need around 30 Tier 3 experts to take down a level 100+ mythic monster. However, if the team had an advanced ancient barrier, they'd be more than capable of slaying a level 100+ mythic monster as long as they had a Tier 3 metric tons advanced ancient barrier scrolls. The revelation even surprised Cold Shadow. She had never thought Shifeng would be capable of obtaining such a treasure. If what Shifeng had suggested were true, and Zero Wing could sell large quantities of the 12 elemental pillars, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion would easily be able to dominate the Hill of Ruins. No superpower in the Apocalypse Empire would be able to contend with the pavilion. All of the various superpowers were nursing headaches over the issue level 100+ mythic monsters presented, including mythology. Although the Tier 3 combat rune was powerful, it could only help players exhibit more of their combat power. It didn't offer a boost to players' basic attributes. Unless players met the minimum basic attribute requirements to raid level 100+ mythic monsters, the Tier 3 combat rune wouldn't be particularly useful. Advanced magic barriers, on the other hand, would be. They might not increase players' combat power or basic attributes, but they could limit a monster's strength. With a set of such scrolls, a team that normally wouldn't have a chance against a level 100+ mythic monster would have hope of defeating it. With an advanced ancient barrier like the 12 elemental pillars, even a Tier 2 team could raid level 100+ mythic monsters. Those scrolls were well worth several times more than ordinary advanced magic barriers. At this stage of the game, superpowers still didn't have enough Tier 3 players to form a full team, but forming a Tier 2 team was a piece of cake. Of course, not only was level 100+ mythic monsters loot bountiful, but it was also the foundation necessary to raid level 100 team dungeons. If even Tier 2 expert teams could slay level 100+ mythic monsters, their power could prepare to raid level 100 team dungeons much sooner than others. If the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion could secure a large stock of 12 elemental pillar scrolls, its development speed regarding Tier 3 players and equipment standards would reach new highs. The pavilion would easily be able to surpass the Apocalypse Empire's various superpowers. Meanwhile, Phoenix Rain stared at the scroll in her hands, dazed. Nine Dragons Emperor broke the silence with a laugh, saying, "Guild Leader Black Flame, this is an advanced ancient barrier scroll we're talking about, yet you're suggesting that you can sell them in bulk? Do you take us for fools?" Nine Dragons Emperor instinctively denied Shifeng's claim. The swordsman must have gone to great lengths to secure a single 12 elemental pillar scroll and was lying about Zero Wing's interest in selling Phoenix Rain a bulk order just to make her look good in front of the pavilion's grand elders. The strongest magic barriers the various superpowers could craft were intermediate rank. Furthermore, not only were the required materials incredibly valuable, but no more than 5 superpowers were actually capable of crafting intermediate magic barrier scrolls. How, exactly, was Zero Wing supposedly capable of mass-producing advanced ancient barrier scroll? Is that so? Shifeng chuckled, pulling 10 sets of 12 elemental pillars, the scrolls he had found in the magic temple, from his bag. Shifeng tossed one scroll after another on the ground, quickly forming a small mound. As he did, Everyone sensed the mana density around them increase considerably. Nine Dragons Emperor had been prepared to mock Shifeng further, but seeing the magic array scrolls, he turned deathly pale and couldn't bring himself to utter a single word. Everyone in the plaza fell silent, and the pavilion's members gazed at Shifeng with admiration. Nine Dragons Emperor was a true hero in the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. Not only was he individually powerful, but he was also an excellent commander. He had even led the pavilion's branch guild in the Black Dragon Empire to prosper, despite the various otherworld powers' invasion. But the moment he had accused Shifeng of lying, the swordsman had revealed 10 sets of the 12 elemental pillars. Moreover, Zero Wing's guild leader tossed them on the ground as if they were worthless pebbles. This was a slap in the face to Nine Dragons Emperor and had been done before the pavilion's members. To top it off, Nine Dragons Emperor couldn't find anything kind of rebuttal. He wouldn't dare. The only thing coming out of his mouth should be compliments for Shifeng. If he said anything else, he might even lose his position as a pavilion master, not to mention his chance to become the great pavilion master. Not even Superpow's guild leaders could subject Nine Dragons Emperor to such humiliation. So, that's the case. Cold Shadow grit her teeth. When Nine Dragons Emperor said nothing more, she knew that the situation was no longer in her favor. She then turned to look at Phoenix Rain and said, "Phoenix Pavilion Master, your insight truly is impressive. Since it seems that a partnership between our guilds is no longer possible, I won't interrupt your discussions with guild leader Black Flame. I have other matters to attend to, so I'll take my leave." Cold Shadow decisively led her subordinates away from the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's residence. She didn't show the slightest hint of anger or disappointment, as if her negotiations with the pavilion had meant nothing to her. Meanwhile, none of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's members were surprised by the outcome. It was clear that Zero Wing had more to offer than mythology, which was based on the Western continent. Even a fool would recognize the stronger potential ally. Cold Shadow wouldn't linger to suffer further embarrassment. Rain, Guild leader Black Flame has taken time out of his busy schedule to visit our main headquarters. As a pavilion master, how can you leave him standing out here for so long? You are being impolite, a white-haired Grand Elder berated Phoenix Rain after Cold Shadow had left the guild residence. The old man had been loud, but everyone could tell that he wasn't angry in the least. Rather, his tone contained joy and excitement. He had obviously chosen to support Phoenix Rain's side. The Grand Elder's comments shook Phoenix Rain from her daze, and she addressed Shifeng, "My mistake. Guild leader Black Flame, please come in." Phoenix Rain had never dreamed that Shifeng would be so powerful as to reveal one trump card after another. Not only had he sent mythology's Cold Shadow packing, but he had also managed to drag the entire Dragon Phoenix Pavilion to her side. The situation had developed so quickly that she was at a loss. Once Phoenix Rain led Shifeng and his entourage into the guild hall, the Grand Elders in the plaza shot Nine Dragons Emperor piteous looks. After expressing their helplessness, they, too, returned to the guild hall, dismissing the other pavilion master. "We're in trouble now, pavilion master." Thanks to Black Flame, the Grand Elders now support Phoenix Rain, Martial Dragon said, frowning as he watched the Grand Elders walk away without a word. After today, Nine Dragons Emperor's chances of becoming the next great pavilion master were non-existent. "Trouble?" Nine Dragons Emperor shot back with a sinister sneer. "Wrong. This is our chance." Phoenix Rain might have ascended to heaven thanks to Zero Wing's potential and foundations, but possessing wealth without the strength to protect it is a crime. Zero Wing shouldn't have revealed its flying ships and advanced ancient barrier scrolls so early. What do you think the various superpowers will do if they find this out? Approach Zero Wing in hopes of cooperation? Martial Dragon guessed after considering the question. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. And if that fails? Nine Dragons Emperor asked, smiling at Shifeng's departing figure. "They'll do everything in their power to destroy Zero Wing," Martial Dragon exclaimed as realization dawned on him. He also realized why Cold Shadow had left so quickly. Zero Wing might be fine with its flying ships, but the advanced ancient barrier scrolls could change the status quo in God's domain. If the various superpowers couldn't get their hands on the 12 elemental pillar scrolls, they wouldn't be content to let a pseudo-superpower like Zero Wing hold on to them. Today's events would certainly reach the various superpowers, and once it did, they would take action. Even if Zero Wing allied with a few superpowers, they couldn't protect the guild. The 12 elemental pillars scrolls touched on the foundations and futures of every superpower. Unless the various superpowers were willing to bow to Zero Wing in the future, they would try to destroy the smaller guild now, ensuring that the status quo remained the same. While Nine Dragons Emperor and Martial Dragon whispered amongst themselves, news of Zero Wing's 3 flying ships and its ability to mass-produce advanced ancient barrier scrolls spread like wildfire, soon reaching the various superpowers' upper echelons. Chapter 2435, Structural Change. Chapter 2435, Structural Change. On the top floor of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's Guild Hall, 3 people were sitting inside the luxurious reception hall, which could easily accommodate 50 people. Aside from Phoenix Rain and Shifeng, only Blue Phoenix was present. The degree of privacy for the meeting was even greater than that for the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's Grand Elder meetings. As for the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's Grand Elders who had been in the plaza before, they wisely stayed away, having no intention of participating in the discussions between Shifeng and Phoenix Rain. Moreover, with Kola, Yang Tianxing, and Zero Wing's other Tier 3 experts standing guard outside the reception hall, anyone who wished to spy on the meeting couldn't do so. Guild leader Black Flame, I really have to thank you this time. If not for your help, those Grand Elders would have sided with Nine Dragons Emperor, Phoenix Rain said as she looked at the 10 sets of 12 elemental pillars on the table. These advanced ancient barrier scrolls are extremely precious, so you should quickly store them. Although magic array scrolls won't suffer any damage from exposure, these scrolls are quite ancient. If you don't store them properly, the magic arrays drawn on them might deteriorate. If that happens, it'll be a huge loss. In God's domain, magic array scrolls normally wouldn't deteriorate. However, some ancient magic array scrolls were a different story. The march of time would compromise the durability of some ancient magic array scrolls. When durability fell to a certain point, it would affect the performance of the magic array scroll itself. Meanwhile, moving the scrolls could reduce their durability by a certain amount. Previously, Shifeng had nonchalantly tossed these ancient barrier scrolls on the ground to humiliate Nine Dragons Emperor. Now, he had even casually placed them on the table. These actions would undoubtedly affect the ancient barrier scrolls' durability. As for selling these ancient barrier scrolls, in Phoenix Rain's opinion, he had said those words just to take control of the situation. After all, advanced ancient barriers were not ordinary advanced barriers. Collecting even one complete set of scrolls for an advanced ancient barrier was extremely difficult. Even now, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion had yet to collect a complete set, much less 10 sets. Meanwhile, at this stage of the game, 10 sets of 12 elemental pillars would be extremely helpful to any superpower. If Zero Wing actually sold these ancient barrier scrolls, it would suffer an immense loss. No need. I originally planned to sell these 10 sets of 12 elemental pillars to you, Phoenix Pavilion Master, Shifeng said, shaking his head. You really plan on selling them? Phoenix Rain was a little surprised at the serious expression on Shifeng's face. She then tried to dissuade him, saying, these are 10 sets of advanced ancient barrier scrolls we are talking about. You can kill a minimum of 10 level 100 mythics with them. If you properly locate these bosses, Zero Wing's main force will receive a huge improvement in strength. If you're worried about Nine Dragons Emperor's side, you can rest assured. I still have a few sets of advanced barrier scrolls. With them, I should be able to head him off. The entire Dragon Phoenix Pavilion could easily tell that Shifeng was only conducting the transaction this time out of respect for Phoenix Rain. As for how many she purchased and how she used them, outsiders wouldn't have a say. She could simply sell the few precious sets of advanced barrier scrolls she had to the guild to buy herself some time. Once she hatched the homed eagle egg from the molten ruin, she would be able to secure much more resources from level 100 neutral maps. As for the 10 sets of 12 elemental pillars, nobody would really know if she had used the scrolls or not. She didn't need to worry about the secret getting out as her main force consisted solely of her trusted aides. With the resources she could gain with the help of a flying mount, tricking the guild's Grand Elders should be feasible. Standing at a side, Blue Phoenix nodded in agreement with Phoenix Rain's words. She felt that Shifeng had already helped them a great deal this time. They naturally couldn't let him suffer any more losses. Phoenix Pavilion Master, you're overthinking things. I'm really here to do business, Shifeng said, a bitter smile forming on his face when he saw Phoenix Rain's and Blue Phoenix's reactions. From the very beginning, he had intended to sell the 12 elemental pillars, though not on such a large scale. Instead, he merely planned to sell it to Zero Wing's partners to ensure that the ancient barrier would not land in the hands of outsiders and aid his enemies. At the same time, it would also earn his guild a large amount of resources and coins. The production of 12 elemental pillar scrolls required a large number of elemental crystals and magic cores, which were treated as strategic resources by guilds. Guilds normally wouldn't sell them. As a result, it was impossible to purchase these materials in bulk. Hence, if Zero Wing wished to mass-produce the 12 elemental pillars, it would have to exchange for these materials with the various powers. Moreover, Shifeng was currently in extreme need of magic crystals and coins. This was especially true for magic crystals. Even though he had 2 ore veins capable of producing magic crystals, his demand for magic crystals was still far above what the 2 ore veins and Zero Wing could supply. As to why he was in dire need of magic crystals, it was because the teleportation gate linking the eastern and western continents cost a lot of magic crystals to operate. Moreover, magic crystals were far rarer and more valuable on the western continent. Hence, magic crystals could be considered a very powerful currency there. To purchase the rare materials over there in bulk, he had to have a large number of magic crystals. Of course, there was also the option of selling the eastern continent's unique materials on the western continent. However, these unique materials were similarly precious on the eastern continent. Moreover, the various superpowers had a monopoly on them, and Zero Wing could get its hands on only a limited amount. After all, superpowers capable of traveling between the 2 main continents generally traded with superpowers that possessed these unique materials. In the end, Shifeng had concluded that he could only conduct transactions using magic crystals. Guild leader Black Flame, can you really supply these 12 elemental pillars in bulk? Blue Phoenix blurted out in surprise when she saw the bitter smile on Shifeng's face. These were advanced ancient barrier scrolls they were talking about. If the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion could purchase them in bulk, then the pavilion's development would definitely skyrocket. Of course. However, you should know how precious the 12 elemental pillars are. I cannot sell them too cheaply. In fact, they can't even be weighed using coins, Shifeng said, chuckling when he saw Blue Phoenix's excited expression. A complete set of 12 elemental pillars will cost 5,000 magic crystals, 500 gold, 500 elemental crystals, and 500 magic cores. That much? Blue Phoenix gasped when she heard Shifeng's words, her excitement dimming considerably. Based on the price he quoted, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion wouldn't be capable of purchasing that many sets, not when the total value of each set of scrolls exceeded 4,000 gold. Moreover, magic crystals, elemental crystals, and magic cores were all strategic resources. Obtaining these items in large numbers wasn't easy. After taking into consideration the guild's own use, the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion would be able to take out only a small number of these items for exchange. This would also be the case for other superpowers. Sure enough, the price really isn't low. Phoenix Rain also revealed a bitter smile as she gazed at the 10 sets of 12 elemental pillars on the table. I'll buy 30 sets first, then. Although she had long since prepared herself for a high price, when she heard Shifeng's quote, she still could not help a little heartache. However, the 12 elemental pillars were an advanced ancient barrier. Compared to the barrier's value, the price wasn't particularly high. After all, intermediate barrier scrolls normally sold for roughly 800 gold per set. Most importantly, these things rarely appeared on the market, as no power would be willing to sell them. Moreover, so long as she properly chose which mythic bosses to raid and her luck wasn't too bad, she would still be able to profit a lot. Not to mention, she would also get a lead on the other superpowers. This could be considered the greatest benefit of the 12 elemental pillars. That won't be a problem. I'll have someone deliver the remaining 20 sets by tomorrow, Shifeng said. He was not at all surprised to see a pained expression appear on Phoenix Rain's face. On the contrary, he very much understood her feelings. This was also the reason why he wanted to seek a partnership with several superpowers. The mana stones required weren't much of a problem. A set of 12 scrolls required only 12 mana stones. Even a master alchemist would need only 1,200 magic crystals to synthesize the mana stones. However, it was a different story for the elemental crystals and magic cores. Producing one set of 12 elemental pillars consumed 144 elemental crystals and magic cores. With Zero Wing's current stockpile, it couldn't create many sets at all. Needless to say, it definitely couldn't supply the scrolls to the guild's Tier 2 teams. After Phoenix Rain confirmed her transaction with Shafong and Blue Phoenix was about to head to the guild's warehouse to retrieve the necessary materials, Phoenix Rain's expression suddenly turned grim. Guild leader Black Flame, why don't we just forget about the transaction for now? We caused a huge commotion in the Residence's plaza this time. Not to mention, Mythology's vice guild leader was present as well. News of this matter will definitely reach the ears of the various superpowers. To make matters worse, you really are capable of mass-producing the 12 elemental pillars. If the various superpowers find out about this, they won't let Zero Wing off the hook. They might even cooperate to force you to hand over the method for obtaining the 12 elemental pillars, Phoenix Rain said. After giving the matter some thought, she still concluded that it wouldn't be wise to purchase the 12 elemental pillars. In God's domain, the various superpowers would always plant spies in other superpowers. The Dragon Phoenix Pavilion was no exception. Hence, news of today's matter had most likely reached the ears of the various superpowers already. It might be fine if Shafong had simply been using the 12 elemental pillars to trick Nine Dragons Emperor. At worst, her reputation in the guild would plummet, and many of the guild's grand elders would switch to Nine Dragons Emperor's side. However, since this matter was true, things had become troublesome. There would be no problem if the 12 elemental pillars transaction involved only a small amount of materials. With her status as a pavilion master, she could secretly conduct the transaction without anybody finding out about it. However, the amount of materials the 12 elemental pillars required was simply too much. If she took out that many materials from the guild warehouse, people would definitely notice. If she used the 12 elemental pillars, the likelihood of discovery would be even greater. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The various superpowers might be able to ignore the fact that Zero Wing had a reliable method for obtaining flying ships, as flying ships could, at most, allow Zero Wing to stabilize its rule over the territories it currently possessed. These flying ships wouldn't budge the various superpowers' foundations at all. However, the 12 elemental pillars were a different story. If Zero Wing supplied the advanced ancient barrier scrolls in bulk, the structure of the current god's domain would change drastically. The various superpowers definitely wouldn't cotton to Zero Wing restraining them or a pseudo-superpower deciding their future. Even the 5 great super guilds wouldn't sit still and watch this happen. In that case, there would only be 2 possible outcomes to this situation. The first would be the various superpowers joining hands to annihilate Zero Wing and maintain the status quo. The second outcome would be Zero Wing being forced to hand over its method for obtaining the 12 elemental pillars and submit itself to the various superpowers. Both of these outcomes would be fatal to Zero Wing's development. Hence, Phoenix Rain decided that it was best to treat today's incident as Shafong tricking Nine Dragons Emperor. That way, Zero Wing would be able to avoid destruction. Chapter 2436, Zero Wing's Craziness. Chapter 2436, Zero Wing's Craziness. Upon hearing Phoenix Rain's words, Blue Phoenix, who had just stood up from her seat, immediately came to a realization. Big Sis Rain, does this mean that Nine Dragons Emperor and that Vice Guild leader from Mythology understood that something like this would happen from the very start, and that's why they gave up and left so peacefully? Blue Phoenix felt a sense of dread when she recalled how calm Nine Dragons Emperor and Cold Shadow had been after failing to force Phoenix Rain to sell her Candlelight shares. Previously, when Shafong stated that he could supply advanced ancient barrier scrolls in large quantities, the benefits the 12 elemental pillars could bring had occupied Blue Phoenix's thoughts. She had failed to consider the potential problems that the 12 elemental pillars would bring. She also never imagined that Nine Dragons Emperor and Cold Shadow would think of this problem so quickly. Meanwhile, judging by how decisively Cold Shadow had left the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's residence, she might have already started planning how she could capitalize on this matter. That's most likely the case, Phoenix Rain said, nodding. However, we can still salvage this situation. So long as we can falsify this matter, the two of them won't be able to take action even if they want to. Although Shifeng had publicly revealed that he possessed 10 sets of 12 elemental pillars, he didn't actually prove that he was capable of supplying the ancient barrier in bulk. At the very least, none of the people that knew about his ability to do so was an outsider. Hence, it wouldn't be difficult to convince the various superpowers that he couldn't. If those superpowers discovered that this matter was fake, then Nine Dragons Emperor and Cold Shadow's plan to target Zero Wing would naturally fall through. After all, the strength Nine Dragons Emperor and Cold Shadow possessed on the eastern continent couldn't shake the current Zero Wing's foundations. You really don't need to hide this matter. If they wish to take action, they are free to do so. If they are capable of doing so, that is, Shifeng said, chuckling when he saw Phoenix Rain and Blue Phoenix worrying about the problems that the 12 elemental pillars would bring Zero Wing. In the current God's domain, nobody knew better than Shifeng what influence the 12 elemental pillars would have. Compared to the benefits the 12 elemental pillars could bring Zero Wing, the consequences of publicizing it were insignificant. After all, the current Zero Wing was no longer as weak as it was before. In God's domain, the period when players were transitioning from level 100 to tier 3 was the longest and most difficult for players to get through. In the past, a massive gap had formed between the various powers because of this period. Some unknown guilds had become superpowers, and some superpowers had faded out of existence as a result of this period. Although Zero Wing currently had a tremendous advantage when producing tier 3 players, the guild's lack of experts prevented it from capitalizing on this advantage. Meanwhile, it was only a matter of time before the various superpowers caught up to Zero Wing in this regard. Hence, what Shifeng needed to do now was expand Zero Wing's advantages and utilize these advantages to allow Zero Wing's experts to break free from this problem. Phoenix Rain hesitated when she saw Shifeng's confident expression. Zero Wing's current strength indeed could not be underestimated, especially with it having 3 flying ships. The presence of these 3 flying ships made it practically impossible for anybody to threaten Zero Wing's air superiority. However, the various superpowers were not easy opponents, either. If the various superpowers banded together, even the 5 great super guilds would have to compromise. Moreover, this matter was all because of her. In reality, Shifeng could have conducted this transaction in secret and slowly developed Zero Wing's strength in God's domain. There wouldn't have been any need for Zero Wing to become enemies with the various superpowers at all. Actually, before I came here, I had Aqua contact a few other guilds and arrange for a meeting with them 3 hours later. At that time, I'll be selling the 12 elemental pillars to them as well, Shifeng said, smiling. So, even if the incident just now hadn't happened, the various superpowers would still find out about this matter. There is no need to blame yourself, Phoenix Pavilion Master. So long as he started selling something like the 12 elemental pillars, he would definitely draw the attention of all superpowers. Hence, he had not hesitated to use the 12 elemental pillars to humiliate Nine Dragons Emperor and Cold Shadow. By doing so, not only would he elevate Phoenix Rain's position in the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, but it would also serve as a small promotion to the several guilds he had invited. At that time, he could save himself the trouble of proving that he was capable of supplying the 12 elemental pillars in bulk. After all, the madness of the various superpowers was the best proof. After hearing Shifeng's explanation, both Phoenix Rain and Blue Phoenix felt that he was simply crazy. Shifeng was basically forsaking his life for money. Selling the 12 elemental pillars might bring him a lot of benefits, but even super guilds would not dare risk becoming enemies with the various superpowers just for this much profit. After all, the current era was different. Tier 2 experts were no longer as useful as before. Only Tier 3 experts could be considered a guild's true combat power. Meanwhile, the various super guilds might have a lot more Tier 3 experts than an ordinary super first-rate guild, but the total number of Tier 3 experts of just 3 or 5 super first-rate guilds could easily surpass that of a super guild, what more all of the Eastern Continent's superpowers. Since you have already said so, then I'll represent the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion in purchasing 100 sets of 12 elemental pillars from Zero Wing. Guild Leader Black Flame, may I know if you can supply this many? Phoenix Rain asked seriously after taking a deep breath. After seeing how crazy Shifeng was behaving, she decided to take a leap of faith. The current Dragon Phoenix Pavilion was in a very awkward position, ranking neither very highly nor lowly among the various superpowers. Since Zero Wing was already doing its best, she naturally had to try her best as well and gamble all of the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's available materials and magic crystals. The 12 elemental pillars were very expensive. In the off chance that the loot of the level 100 plus mythic monsters the guild hunted was not ideal and failed to allow the guild to recoup its investment, the other superpowers in the Apocalypse Empire were likely to surpass the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. After all, a guild's development required plenty of resources. This was especially true for magic crystals. However, if her gamble paid off and the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion managed to secure enough top-tier equipment to arm a 100-man raid team within a short period, at that time, not only would the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion attain absolute dominance over the Hill of Ruins, but it could also start raiding level 100 team dungeons much sooner than other superpowers. With these advantages, the losses the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion would suffer from expending so many resources would no longer be a problem. Big Sis Rain. Blue Phoenix gaped in shock upon hearing Phoenix Rain's words. She never thought that Phoenix Rain would take such decisive action. With the invasion of the otherworld powers having greatly intensified the competition in the Apocalypse Empire, just purchasing 30 sets of 12 elemental pillars would have already put a heavy strain on the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's resources. Purchasing 100 sets would basically empty the guild's stockpile. If the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion failed to secure dominance over the Hill of Ruins with the 100 sets of 12 elemental pillars, then the guild would suffer immense losses. At that time, Phoenix Rain would lose all hope of becoming the next great pavilion master. That won't be a problem. However, I'm afraid you'll have to wait until tomorrow for all 100 sets to be delivered, Shifeng said. He, too, was surprised at the amount that Phoenix Rain requested. Purchasing 100 sets of 12 elemental pillars would cost 500,000 magic crystals, 50,000 gold, 50,000 elemental crystals, and 50,000 elemental cores. This was no trivial amount of resources. There was no superpower that would not feel strained from spending so many resources. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Blue, start making the necessary preparations. Once Phoenix Rain received Shifeng's confirmation, she immediately had Blue Phoenix collect the required materials from the guild warehouse. When Blue Phoenix visited the residence's warehouse, her actions immediately created an uproar among the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's upper echelons. The request for 50,000 gold was fine, as that wasn't a significant amount of money for the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. However, the number of magic crystals, elemental crystals, and magic cores that Blue Phoenix requested was another matter altogether. These were all materials necessary to produce potions needed for exploration, yet Blue Phoenix had put in a request for more than 90% of the guild's stockpile for these materials. However, neither Ku Rong nor the Grand Elders of the guild tried to stop Blue Phoenix. On the contrary, they immediately approved Blue Phoenix's request and instructed the warehouse manager to supply Blue Phoenix with all of the requested materials. They also didn't bother questioning her purpose for these materials. After all, in the current Dragon Phoenix Pavilion, Phoenix Rain could already be considered the pseudo-great pavilion master. She was well within her authority to make use of these materials. Meanwhile, this shocking piece of news also entered the various superpowers' ears immediately. Chapter 2437, Shocking All Sides. Chapter 2437, Shocking All Sides. Black Dragon Empire, Black Dragon City, Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's residence. Currently, over 50 players were seated inside the spacious top-floor reception room. Close observation would reveal that every one of these players had reached Tier 3. Even a Superpowers Guild leader would turn grim upon seeing this scene. After all, at this stage of the game, only a few superpowers had more than 50 Tier 3 players under their command. Dragon Pavilion Master, why did you call us here today? A level 104, Tier 3 male shield warrior with a thin and short body asked, frowning. He showed not the slightest bit of respect for Nine Dragons Emperor. Meanwhile, no one in the reception room found the shield warrior's attitude surprising. On the contrary, everyone considered it completely reasonable because this thin and short, middle-aged man was Stubborn Heart. Not only was Stubborn Heart the guild leader of Grim Reaper, the Black Dragon Empire's #1 dark guild, but he was also nicknamed Steel Hammer. Although Grim Reaper was not a superpower, it still wasn't an existence ordinary first-rate guilds could go up against. In addition, dark players were a bunch of lunatics with only slaughter on their minds, and dark guilds had a completely different development path from ordinary guilds. Hence, Grim Reaper did not fear any of the superpowers operating in the Black Dragon Empire. Naturally, Stubborn Heart wouldn't bother behaving politely around Nine Dragons Emperor. Upon hearing Stubborn Heart's question, everyone present turned to look at Nine Dragons Emperor curiously. After all, this was also the question they all wished to ask. Everyone in the room was a person of respectable standing in the Black Dragon Empire. They were either the guild leaders of dark guilds or the commanders of top adventurer teams. There were even a few guild leaders of first-rate guilds present. This was basically a gathering of the Black Dragon Empire's top brass. Naturally, it's good news, Nine Dragons Emperor replied with a calm smile. Haven't you all been wishing to develop in the Cold Spring Forest? Your chance has come. Cold Spring Forest was the level 100 neutral map closest to the Black Dragon Empire. However, due to Zero Wing's Stone Forest City, the Black Dragon Empire's various major powers could only watch helplessly as Zero Wing and its partners monopolized the entire map. After all, if even superpowers were helpless against Stone Forest City, how could the various major powers do anything against it? What are you trying to say? Stubborn Heart asked, somewhat tempted by Nine Dragons Emperor's words. Cold Spring Forest was a level 100 neutral map. Even dark guilds like Grim Reaper could not avoid grinding in such maps. If Grim Reaper could gain some benefits from Cold Spring Forest, then the guild's development would definitely take a leap forward. I believe you more or less know about the matter that happened over at the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion recently, Nine Dragons Emperor said. To be precise, I'm referring to Zero Wing taking out advanced ancient barrier scrolls. That's right. We know a little about that, but what of it? Is Zero Wing willing to sell us some? Stubborn Heart asked, chuckling. Not to mention, nobody knows if that information is actually true or not. At this stage of the game, any power would consider the 12 elemental pillars an absolute treasure. Nobody would not be tempted by it. However, how could Zero Wing possibly sell such a precious treasure to outsiders? Moreover, that was an advanced ancient barrier they were talking about, technology passed down from ancient times. It shouldn't be possible to procure many of it. I can tell you now that Zero Wing is indeed capable of supplying a large number of those ancient barrier scrolls, Nine Dragons Emperor said with some excitement. Moreover, I have solid proof of this matter. How is that possible? The technology necessary to produce ancient barrier scrolls should have been lost in ancient times. Everyone reacted in surprise when they heard Nine Dragons Emperor's confident reply. They had never thought that this piece of information was true. As for Nine Dragons Emperor lying to them, the chances of that happening were close to zero. After all, Nine Dragons Emperor wouldn't gain any benefits from doing so. What does this have to do with us? Even if we make a fuss about this, we still won't get our hands on those scrolls, Stubborn Heart stated. While it was indeed frightening that Zero Wing could supply advanced ancient barrier scrolls in bulk, that was a matter that concerned only the various superpowers. Major powers like theirs weren't qualified to interfere in this matter at all. That's why I have gathered you all here, Nine Dragons Emperor said as he swept a glance around the room. Smiling, he continued, you might not be strong on your own, but combined, even current super guilds cannot ignore your strength. Meanwhile, because of the ancient barrier scrolls, the various superpowers definitely won't let Zero Wing off the hook this time. It won't matter even if Zero Wing possesses Stone Forest City. Under the might of a Tier 3 army, only destruction awaits Zero Wing. At that time, if we form an alliance, we might not be able to obtain those ancient barrier scrolls, but we can get a share of Stone Forest City's benefits. Are you all not interested in Stone Forest City? Nine Dragons Emperor's words seemed replete with infinite temptation since everyone's breathing quickened after listening to his speech. The eyes of some of those present even started glowing. Who wouldn't be interested in the current Stone Forest City? Even now, Stone Forest City was still the only city established in a level 100 neutral map on the eastern continent. It allowed players to not only recover from exhaustion rapidly but also save up on plenty of travel time. Many Tier 3 experts were willing to spend astronomical amounts of money just to rent a house there. Even then, actually renting a house in the city remained an extremely difficult proposition. If they became the rulers of Stone Forest City, the profits they could rake in would be unimaginable. Everyone present immediately signed a contract with Nine Dragons Emperor and formed a powerful alliance of interests. Meanwhile, the purpose of this alliance was to provide its members with greater authority when negotiating with the various superpowers. At the same time, inside one of the VIP rooms of an advanced restaurant in Starmoon Kingdom's White River City, Vice Guild Leader, we have already verified Black Flame's words. In order to purchase a large number of those ancient barrier scrolls, Phoenix Rain has gone as far as to empty out the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's stockpile of materials and magic crystals, a tall and robust man too. 4 meters tall, reported respectfully to the beautiful, short-haired woman before him. This short-haired woman was none other than Cold Shadow, one of mythology's Vice Guild leaders. After leaving Twilight City, she had immediately made her way to White River City. At the same time, she had also tasked her spies with monitoring the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's every action. I never thought that Zero Wing would actually possess such a foundation. It seems I really underestimated it before. When Cold Shadow heard her subordinate's report, her lips curled up into a smile, as if she had just found an interesting toy. In addition, we have also received news that Zero Wing has invited the Secret Pavilion, 13 Thrones, Giant's Heart, and Unyielding Soul for a meeting. By the looks of it, Zero Wing is planning to rope these guilds in, using the ancient barrier scrolls to form a common front. Not a bad decision. If Zero Wing has the full support of these guilds, things will indeed become more troublesome, Cold Shadow said, smiling. Unfortunately, it is useless, even if these guilds band together. Proceed according to the plan. Whether it is those ancient barrier scrolls or Zero Wing's secret, we must obtain them all. In her opinion, Shifeng's action of using the 12 elemental pillars to suppress mythology was simply too immature. He just wasn't aware of the consequences of distributing the 12 elemental pillars in bulk. Let alone the secret pavilion, even if the 5 great super guilds worked together, they still wouldn't be able to stop an army of several thousand Tier 3 experts. At the same time, inside a lush, green, Primeval forest, a 100-man team consisting of more than 40 Tier 3 experts was resting below a large tree. Meanwhile, lying around this team were the corpses of level 105+ monsters. Many among them were at the Great Lord rank, and one of them was even a Grand Lord ranked archaic species. Meanwhile, the leader of this team was none other than the Secret Pavilion's Yuan Taishin. Black Flame must be insane. How can he possibly do this? Yuan Taishin's complexion paled after he read the report his subordinate sent him. He is making an enemy out of every superpower on the eastern continent. Originally, Yuan Taishin thought that Shifeng was inviting the Secret Pavilion for a meeting because of some good news. He never imagined that Shifeng would pull such a huge stunt. Uncle Yuan, are we still attending the meeting? Purple Jade asked, a gloomy expression forming on her face after she read the report. Zero Wing had truly gone overboard this time. Previously, the matter regarding Stone Forest City's transfer to the bottomless abyss was still acceptable. After all, back then, even the strongest player was at Tier 2. At worst, Stone Forest City's transfer would make a few superpowers envious. No superpower would choose to go for broke. However, Zero Wing's actions this time touched upon the foundations of the various superpowers. To protect themselves, the superpowers would definitely do everything they could to destroy Zero Wing. This time, even the Secret Pavilion would not be capable of shielding Zero Wing. Of course. Moreover, we need to hurry over immediately. If we wait until the various superpowers form an alliance, Everything will be too late, Yuan Taishin said. Immediately, he organized his team and made his way to White River City, planning to persuade Shifeng to hand over the 12 elemental pillars acquisition method. After that, the secret pavilion would take responsibility for negotiating with the various superpowers. Otherwise, only death awaited Zero Wing. Elsewhere, after Shifeng received the payment from Phoenix Rain, he promptly returned to White River City as well. However, he did not start production of the 12 elemental pillars. Instead, he made a trip to the Adventurers Association in order to register his Night Division's members for their Tier 3 promotion quest. Originally, he should have conducted these registration procedures long ago. A Night Division's members were considered the private soldiers of players. They were not exactly the same as personal guards. Although Knights would still automatically challenge their Tier 3 promotion quests once they reached level 100, after succeeding in their promotion quest, they still needed their lord to pay a procedural fee to the Adventurers Association to complete their promotion. Previously, as Shifeng had been tied up with one problem after another, he had not had the time to take care of this matter. Now that all his affairs were settled, he naturally had to get this matter done. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to open Stone Forest City to the public and turn the city into a true gold mine. After all, if a guild city wished to earn money, it needed a large player population. After transferring Stone Forest City to the Cold Spring Forest, in order to ensure Zero Wing's advantage, Shifeng had decided to give access only to Zero Wing's allies and a small number of outsiders. However, now that the number of Tier 3 players in the game was increasing, Stone Forest City's advantages were continuously shrinking. In addition, it cost an enormous amount of money to maintain Stone Forest City's daily operations. There was also the economic war with Starlink. Due to these factors, Zero Wing was currently barely making ends meet. Hence, it became necessary for Zero Wing to open Stone Forest City to the public. Previously, with Zero Wing's current strength, Shifeng wouldn't have dared open Stone Forest City to the public. Fortunately, however, he was a lord and possessed a 5,000-man Night Division, which was the reason why he dared to publicize the 12 elemental pillars. Although he felt that only 200 or so of his 5,000 knights were capable of reaching Tier 3 this soon, NPCs were far stronger than players. Given those Tier 3 NPCs, in combination with the strength of the Tier 2 knights and Stone Forest City's defenses, current superpowers would have a very difficult time threatening Stone Forest City. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Meanwhile, if the various superpowers didn't pose a threat to Stone Forest City, they naturally couldn't deal Zero Wing a heavy blow. Lord Bronze Legatee, how may I be of service? Administrator Lorraine asked with a smile after walking into the VIP room Shifeng occupied. I wish to see the list of my knights that have completed their promotion quest, Shifeng said. Very well. Lorraine nodded before leaving to search for the necessary information. A short moment later, she returned and handed a list to Shifeng, saying, currently, 556 of your knights have completed their promotion quest. Do you wish to conduct the registration procedures for all of them? Chapter 2438, Frightening Night Division. Chapter 2438, Frightening Night Division 556. Why are there so many? Shifeng stared at the list in his hands in disbelief. By his estimates, even though the knights he recruited were of high quality, not that many of them should have been able to complete their Tier 3 promotion quest this soon. After all, Tier 3 was a significant turning point, even for NPCs. Normally, Bronze Tier 2 knights would have less than a 5% chance of completing their Tier 3 promotion quest, while Mysterious Iron Knights' odds would be less than 10%. Only after reaching the Secret Silver rank would knights have an 80% chance of completing their Tier 3 promotion quest. This was also the reason why players had treated knights at the Secret Silver rank or above as treasures in his past life. Hence, of the 5,000 knights he recruited, he would be fortunate if even 200 of them had succeeded in their Tier 3 promotion quest. Now, however, the actual number was more than double his estimates. Those were 556 Tier 3 NPCs they were talking about. Normally, only 2-star lords had so many Tier 3 knights. In order to become a 2-star lord, players needed to possess 200 lord popularity points, twice the amount required to become a 1-star lord. Meanwhile, after becoming a 2-star lord, players could command an additional 2,000 knights, raising the total to 7,000. Compared to 1-star lords, 2-star lords would be much more attractive to NPCs. However, even under such a situation, 2-star lords would generally have around 600 tier 3 knights. Moreover, achieving this number required the investment of a lot of time and resources. Developing knights couldn't be accomplished within just a few days or weeks. After all, in God's domain, many ordinary players couldn't even reach tier 3. Those that reached tier 3 would only be considered subpar among tier 3 existences. Even bronze tier 3 knights could suppress them easily. Normally, a team of 200 bronze tier 3 knights would be more than sufficient for maintaining the security of a guild city with a player population of around 3 million. In fact, such a guild city might even be much safer than NPC cities. In minor NPC cities, tier 3 players were fully capable of killing players in the city and then fleeing with their lives. After all, minor NPC cities were generally guarded by high-level tier 2 NPCs at most. However, it was a different story with tier 3 knights. Even tier 3 peak experts couldn't outrun a bronze tier 3 knight. Hence, during Shifeng's previous life, very few experts had dared to cause trouble inside cities guarded by tier 3 knights unless they were prepared to suffer mutual destruction or worse, failing to kill their targets and losing their lives. This was the amazing aspect of 1-star lords. If a guild were to rely on its members to defend its guild city, the guild wouldn't achieve such a deterrent effect. Meanwhile, now that Shifeng had 556 tier 3 knights, let alone safeguarding a guild city with a player population of 3 million, he wouldn't have any problems protecting 2 such cities. In fact, with this number of tier 3 knights, he could even guarantee the safety of an advanced city. Could my knight's growth potentials be very high because I am the first 1-star lord to draft NPCs from the various kingdoms and empires? After giving the matter some thought, Shifeng found this to be the only possible explanation. Back then, he had spent a lot of money to recruit knights in various major NPC cities. Both the quantity and quality of the knights that answered his draft had exceeded his expectations. He suspected that the knights he recruited had considerably high growth potentials as well. For example, a bronze knight's growth potential was generally between 31 and 50. However, a bronze knight with 50 growth potential would have a considerably better chance of reaching tier 3 than a bronze knight with 31 growth potential. If his speculation was correct and the knights he recruited all possessed very high growth potential, then it wasn't unreasonable that so many of them had succeeded in their tier 3 promotion quests. Lord Bronze Legatee, do you wish to conduct the procedures now? Lorraine prompted once more as she looked at Shifeng's dazed expression. Yes, of course. Shifeng replied hurriedly. These were 556 tier 3s they were talking about. Moreover, they were tier 3 NPCs. Currently, a superpower would be fortunate to have even 50 tier 3 experts under their command. 500 would definitely be an astronomical amount for the various superpowers. Not to mention, tier 3 NPCs were generally much stronger than tier 3 players. If he revealed these tier 3 knights to the public, he would scare a lot of people to death. Unfortunately, unlike personal guards, knights could operate only within their lord's territories. Otherwise, with over 500 tier 3 NPCs under his command, he could easily trample any of the current superpowers in God's domain. Very well. The tier 3 registration procedures cost 10 gold per person. The total bill is 5,560 gold, Lorraine said. All right. Shifeng nodded. He then added, I also wish to replace the equipment of these people. Please upgrade the equipment of all those that aren't equipped in Feingold equipment to the Feingold rank. The registration fee was a small price to pay. If he could upgrade all 5,000 of his knights to tier 3, let alone 10 gold per person, he would be willing to pay even 100 gold each. However, that was only a dream. After all, knights at the secret silver rank or above were far too rare. Being able to recruit even one was already a fortunate matter. Take the current situation, for example. Even now, Shifeng was still issuing draft orders in the various major NPC cities and replacing his weaker knights with better ones. However, even after so many days, he had only managed to get some new mysterious Iron Knights. He still hadn't recruited any new secret silver knights. One could see just how difficult it was to come across secret silver knights. Meanwhile, after reaching Tier 3, although the basic attributes of knights would vary, depending on their growth potential, their overall combat power was still contingent on their weapons and equipment. There was a massive difference in combat power between a knight geared in bronze equipment and a knight geared in epic equipment. Moreover, unlike players, NPCs were much easier to gear. One just needed sufficient funds. Of course, there was a limit to the weapons and equipment lords could purchase for their knights, and that limit was the epic rank. Gearing knights in fragmented legendary or legendary items required special means. Currently, Shi Feng's greatest wish was to gear every one of his knights in a full set of epic equipment. However, this was something he only dared dream of. After all, one set of level 100 to level 150 epic equipment cost 4,000 gold. If he wanted to arm his entire knight division in epic equipment, it would cost him 20 million gold. 20 million. This was an astronomical amount even for superpowers, let alone Zero Wing. Currently, the best he could do was to gear his secret silver and fine gold knights in epic equipment and the remaining Tier 3 knights in fine gold equipment. As for the Tier 2 knights, most of them still used secret silver equipment. Although Zero Wing had constantly been upgrading the knights' weapons and equipment, the amount invested wasn't a lot, and the upgrades were generally done in very small batches. Shi Feng only dared to upgrade the equipment of more than 500 people because he had some spare funds on hand. Of the 556 people in question, 478 require a change in equipment. Each set of level 100 fine gold equipment is priced at 100 gold. Including the registration fee, your total comes to 53,360 gold, Lorraine said, smiling after taking a look at the list. When Shi Feng heard the price Lorraine quoted, he involuntarily winced slightly as he took out most of the coins he had on hand. It seems I'll have to earn even more money now. Otherwise, I won't be able to nurture these Tier 3 knights. Shi Feng revealed a bitter smile when he saw that he had only around 400 gold left in his bag. He had gone to great lengths to earn 50,000 gold from Phoenix Rain. Just when he thought he had become slightly rich again, all of his money disappeared in the blink of an eye. If not for him having close to 4,000 gold before his transaction with Phoenix Rain, he wouldn't have been able to afford to replace the equipment of his Tier 3 knights. Although 400 gold was a huge sum of money to expert players, Shi Feng was the guild leader of Zero Wing. Having just 400 gold on him was extremely shabby. Moreover, after his knights officially reached Tier 3, their weekly salaries and nurturing fees had also increased. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU as an example, Bronze Tier 3 knights demanded a weekly salary of 200 gold and cost 100 gold per week to nurture. These numbers could basically rival those of fine gold Tier 2 knights. Meanwhile, nearly 300 of the 556 Tier 3 knights were bronze knights. Just nurturing these bronze knights would cost almost 90,000 gold per week. After including the Tier 3 knights that were at the mysterious iron rank and above, nurturing these 556 Tier 3 knights would cost more than 200,000 gold per week. After Shi Feng footed the bill, Aqua Rose suddenly contacted him. Guild leader, Yuan Taishan, and his entourage have arrived at Stone Forest City. Yuan Taishan has quite an ugly expression on his face and says that he has urgent business to discuss with you, Aqua Rose said. They're here so soon. Have them wait in the City Lord's mansion. I'll head over right away, Shi Feng said, chuckling. He then took out a guild transfer scroll for Stone Forest City and disappeared from the VIP room. Chapter 2439, Commotion at Cold Spring Canyon, Stone Forest City. Chapter 2439, Commotion at Cold Spring Canyon, Stone Forest City. Under Aqua Rose's lead, Yuan Taishan and Purple Jade reached the City Lord's mansion. Just as they were about to enter it, a group of level 100 players, who had just arrived at Stone Forest City, happened to walk by, their eyes filled with shock and wonder as they took in the players around them. Are there so many Tier 3 experts here normally? Isn't Stone Forest City a little too amazing? A level 100 female elementalist exclaimed. Tier 3 experts were currently the strongest combatants in the game. Even first-rate guilds would be fortunate to have a dozen Tier 3 experts under their command. Since there were only a few first-rate guilds in every kingdom and empire, it was incredibly difficult to come across Tier 3 players. Normally, it would be rare to encounter a handful of Tier 3 players even on the main street of an empire's capital. Now, however, there were easily more than 24 Tier 3 players walking along Stone Forest City's main street. However, the resident players of Stone Forest City were behaving as if this situation was normal. Everyone was doing their own thing and paid no attention to the Tier 3 players. There's nothing to get surprised about. Do you know what kind of place Stone Forest City is? The level 102, Tier 3 Shield Warrior, who was the female elementalist's team leader, said. In a low tone, he continued, remember to be extra careful when you're here in the future. Even if the 100 Flowers Palace is a first-rate guild in the Dark Knight Empire, it still can't ensure your safety here. You can only let your guard down after you have reached Tier 3 as well. Currently, Stone Forest City was the only guild city established in a level 100 neutral map, so it held a powerful attraction for players. However, aside from Zero Wing's partner guilds, other players and powers that wished to enter the city could do so only by renting the city's private houses. Meanwhile, Stone Forest City's private houses were both incomparably rare and expensive. Ordinary experts couldn't afford them at all. One could say that every player residing in Stone Forest City either possessed powerful backing or was an extremely powerful individual. Due to this reason, if one accidentally offended someone in Stone Forest City, particularly the Tier 3 players of the city, then one would be in for an absolute nightmare. Players might be safe inside Stone Forest City, as there were NPC knights and Zero Wings experts patrolling it. However, once players left the city, it was a different story. Tier 3 players ruled the fields outside. One would not receive any respect even if they originated from a first-rate guild. Upon hearing this level 102, Tier 3 Shield Warrior's words, the 100 Flowers Palace's dozen or so talented newcomers promptly nodded their heads and no longer dared to speak casually. Right now, they could clearly sense the attention and auras coming from the people around them. The gazes of the Tier 3 experts, in particular, carried a hint of killing intent. It was as if these people were hunters that had just found their prey. Fortunately, there were level 115 plus, Tier 2 NPC knights, as well as Zero Wing and Secret Pavilion experts, maintaining order in the city. There was also the fact that their team leader was a Tier 3 Shield Warrior. Otherwise, these Tier 3 experts would no doubt find opportunities to kill them in the city and plunder the level 100 top-tier weapons and equipment their guild had prepared for them. It seems the situation in Stone Forest City is becoming increasingly unstable. Yuan Taishin frowned grimly as he looked at the Tier 3 experts roaming the main street. He felt that he had still underestimated the difficulty of developing and managing Stone Forest City. Although Zero Wing already had more than 50 players that had reached Tier 3, that number was still far from comparable to the total number of Tier 3 experts in a single kingdom or empire. Moreover, as more time passed, the number of Tier 3 players in the various kingdoms and empires would only increase at a pace that far outstripped Zero Wing's. Take the current Stone Forest City, for example. Previously, Zero Wing was capable of suppressing all of the Tier 3 players operating within the city with just 24 Tier 3 experts. Now, however, it was no exaggeration to say that the total number of Tier 3 experts Zero Wing commanded couldn't even rival the number of Tier 3 experts dwelling in the city. As more time passed, this gap would only widen. After all, Cold Spring Forest was a leveling heaven for players. More and more Tier 3 experts would seek to develop here in the future. Meanwhile, as Stone Forest City's Tier 3 expert population increased, the city's security would also become a big problem. Although the Secret Pavilion had garrisoned plenty of its own Tier 3 experts in the city, security remained a problem. After all, Tier 3 experts were powerhouses capable of committing crimes and escaping from even major NPC cities, let alone a guild city like Stone Forest City. Take the current situation, for example. The Tier 3 experts operating in Stone Forest City no longer bothered to hide their killing intent. After all, they understood that managing them was already a challenge for Zero Wing. The guild no longer possessed absolute might and authority in the city. At this rate, It was only a matter of time before Tier 3 experts started secretly taking action within city limits. Yet, despite Stone Forest City falling into such a predicament, not only did Shifeng not try to think of ways to stabilize the city's situation and properly develop Zero Wing in secret, but he had even gone and aggravated the various superpowers, leaving the superpowers with no choice but to annihilate Zero Wing. Now that the situation had come to this, even the secret pavilion would have a very difficult time guaranteeing Zero Wing's safety. However, Yuan Taishin did not put too much thought into the matter. Instead, he promptly followed Aqua Rose through the City Lord's mansion's entrance. Right now, his priority was to persuade Shifeng to hand over the 12 elemental pillars' benefits. Otherwise, the secret pavilion would have nothing to negotiate with to fend off the various superpowers. However, just as the trio were about to enter the inner courtyard of the City Lord's mansion, a regional system announcement suddenly sounded in their ears. Cold Spring Forest Region System Announcement. The seal on Stone Forest City has been lifted, and the city is now officially open to the public. All players may now enter the city to rest after paying an entrance fee. The system announcement repeated 3 times. Although the main god system's mechanical voice contained no emotions, its words thoroughly stunned Yuan Taishin. Is he insane? Looking at the system announcement, Yuan Taishin even wondered if he had heard and seen wrong. Even when Stone Forest City was sealed, Zero Wing was already having difficulties managing the city. If the city was opened to the public, Yuan Taishin did not dare to imagine what it would become. After all, the various superpowers were keeping a close eye on Zero Wing. They might have even started forming alliances already. Opening Stone Forest City to the public now would be no different from gifting the city to the various superpowers. Vice Guild Leader Aqua, what is Guild Leader Black Flame trying to do? Is he really planning to forsake his life for money? Purple Jade could not help asking Aqua Rose after seeing the system announcement. In Purple Jade's opinion, Shifeng was already plenty crazy for selling a treasure like the 12 elemental pillars in bulk. Now, he had actually gone a step further and opened the insecure Stone Forest City to the public. At this rate, even if the various superpowers did not take action, Stone Forest City would still fall into ruin from the large number of experts that would swarm into the city. At this moment, let alone Yuan Taishin and Purple Jade, even the players operating within the Cold Spring Forest were stunned by this announcement. None of them had thought that Zero Wing would actually allow the public into Stone Forest City. After all, current Tier 3 players were no longer the same as before, no longer existences that ordinary NPC soldiers could suppress. If a large number of Tier 3 experts swarmed into Stone Forest City, the city might still belong to Zero Wing, but the guild would no longer be its absolute ruler. Following a brief moment of surprise, the players operating within the Cold Spring Forest were ecstatic at this piece of news. Stone Forest City's opening meant that they could operate freely in the Cold Spring Forest in the future. They no longer had to waste time traveling between the neutral map and an NPC city. They would also have a much easier time challenging their Tier 3 promotion quest. Meanwhile, all they had to pay in exchange for these conveniences was a small entrance fee. No, I definitely cannot let him mess around like this. The secret pavilion is also a shareholder in Stone Forest City. We need to seal Stone Forest City again right away. If we wait until all of Cold Spring Forest's experts enter the city, then the entire city will fall into ruin. Yuan Taishin felt that Shifeng had truly gone insane this time. After saying so, he immediately dashed toward the City Lord's mansion's inner courtyard, planning to make his way to the City Lord's office, as players could choose to open or seal the entire city only in the office. However, as soon as he opened the doors to the inner courtyard, a tsunami-like aura immediately struck him, driving an overwhelming sense of fear and helplessness into him. Both Yuan Taishin and Purple Jade abruptly jumped back, instantly putting a huge distance between themselves and the inner courtyard's entrance. They wore extremely grim expressions as they looked warily at the inner courtyard's plaza, which rivaled the size of a football field. Tier 3, NPCS? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. What is going on here? When Yuan Taishin and Purple Jade first arrived at the small plaza, confusion had momentarily overwhelmed them. Afterward, they gasped reflexively. Their reaction was because the plaza was filled with level 115 plus NPCs, all of whom had actually reached Tier 3. Moreover, these NPCs radiated incredibly powerful auras, with the strongest NPCs inspiring despair even in experts like Yuan Taishan and Purple Jade. At this moment, Yuan Taishan and Purple Jade felt as if he had just opened Pandora's box. Meanwhile, the most frightening thing was that all of these Tier 3 NPCs were staring at them right now. Chapter 2440, Yuan Tiexin's Shock. Chapter 2440, Yuan Tiexin's shock, being the focus of attention from hundreds of Tier 3 NPCs, placed immense pressure on Yuan Taishan and Purple Jade. For a moment, they even felt the urge to turn around and flee. Although both of them had reached Tier 3 already, they were still far from comparable to Tier 3 NPCs in terms of strength. This difference wasn't only in basic attributes. Recently promoted Tier 3 players like them had no way of competing against Tier 3 NPCs in this regard. Moreover, Tier 3 NPCs were existences capable of serving as the magistrate of minor NPC cities. At this point, there was no player in God's domain that did not fear the might of an NPC city's magistrate. This remained the case even after Tier 3 players came into existence. Meanwhile, several hundred magistrate-level NPCs were staring at Yuan Taishan and Purple Jade. One could easily imagine how much pressure they were under. Have the Dark Forces NPCs occupied Stone Forest City already? Yuan Tiexin's mind gave birth to such a thought as he gazed at the Tier 3 NPCs before him. Since the launch of God's Domain until now, many instances of the Dark Forces NPCs occupying neutral maps had already occurred. These situations were similar to events triggered by players. If players managed to resolve this crisis in time, then they were rewarded handsomely. If not, then the Dark Forces would take over the neutral map completely. At this moment, Stone Forest City might have come across a similar event. There was no explanation for why so many Tier 3 NPCs had suddenly appeared in Stone Forest City, otherwise. It would also explain why Stone Forest City was suddenly opened to the public. Uncle Yuan, what should we do? These NPCs have already locked on to our auras, Purple Jade asked anxiously. At this moment, she did not have the slightest intention whatsoever of conquering this event. After all, this situation could no longer be considered an event. This was practically a natural disaster. Escaping from just one level 100, Tier 3 NPC would already be difficult for her. Now, however, there were hundreds of level 115 plus, Tier 3 NPCs standing inside the plaza. How was she to escape in such a situation? We don't have any other options. I'll try to block them in a moment. Use that chance to activate a Tier 3 instantaneous movement scroll and leave this place. Be quick. These Tier 3 NPCs have reaction speeds and combat standards far superior to those great lords and grand lords we've faced. They won't give us any opportunities to take advantage of, Yuan Taishan said. At this moment, he understood that it was impossible for both of them to escape. They could only sacrifice one person to create an opportunity for the other. In God's domain, NPCs were far more intelligent than monsters. They were also much more experienced and sharper than players when it came to combat. Moreover, the higher their tier, the more intelligent NPCs became. After reaching Tier 3, NPCs basically wouldn't give players a chance to use magic tools. In a situation where NPCs had the advantage in combat power, even Tier 3 peak experts like them would have a very difficult time retrieving a magic tool from their bags, much less activating it. This was because the brief lapse in defense this action would create would be more than enough for Tier 3 NPCs to instantly kill them. Meanwhile, as a Tier 3 metric tons, if Yuan Taishan activated all his life-saving skills, he could more or less hold off these NPCs for a brief period. However, it was a different story for Purple Jade, who was a Tier 3 Sword King. If she tried to block these Tier 3 NPCs, she would most likely end up vaporized in an instant. After all, their opponents weren't just 2 or 3 Tier 3 NPCs, but several hundred Tier 3 NPCs instead. I understand. Purple Jade nodded. Although she felt reluctant, she understood that this was their best option. Otherwise, both of them would die here. Losing a level might not be a huge deal for Tier 3 players like them, but the top-tier equipment they would lose as a result of death was. Once Purple Jade nodded, Yuan Taishan immediately raised his shield and prepared to activate his life-saving skills. However, just as Yuan Taishan was about to charge into the inner courtyard and attract the NPC's attention, a familiar voice suddenly came from the inner courtyard. "Elder Yuan, why are you here? Didn't Aqua lead you to the reception room?" This voice stunned both Yuan Taishan and Purple Jade because it sounded incredibly familiar. However, they also felt that it should be impossible for them to hear this voice at this place. Both of them reflexively turned toward this voice. In the next moment, the rows of Tier 3 NPCs suddenly parted, opening up a path for a cloaked man standing in the middle of the inner courtyard's plaza. At the same time, every one of these NPCs assumed a respectful pose, their actions suggestive of vassals welcoming their ruler. When Yuan Taishan and Purple Jade saw the cloaked man, they were again stunned. Are you really Guild Leader Black Flame?" Purple Jade asked in an astonished tone as she looked at Shifeng. Tier 3 NPCs were existences that players like herself viewed with dread. After reaching Tier 3, she became even more aware of just how powerful Tier 3 NPCs were. Now, however, the several hundred Tier 3 NPCs standing in the plaza were actually acting subservient to Shifeng. In such a situation, how could Shifeng still be considered a player? He was basically the king of a country. "Of course I am Black Flame," Shifeng replied, chuckling. "If not, who do you think I am?" Shifeng found Yuan Taishan and Purple Jade's shock completely understandable. After all, there were over 500 Tier 3 NPCs standing before them. Even an NPC kingdom did not boast of so many Tier 3 NPCs under its command. Now that all of these NPCs were assembled, it was no exaggeration to call them an unstoppable force. At this moment, let alone Tier 3 experts like Yuan Taishan and Purple Jade, even Tier 4 experts would have to flee for their lives when facing such an army. After all, Tier 3 NPCs were different from monsters. When working together, they could boost their combat power exponentially. If they used large-scale combination spells and skills, the combat power they could exhibit would far exceed what was apparent on the surface. This was also the reason why the 10 Saints Empire's 7 Mythic Knight divisions were capable of pacifying the neighboring kingdoms and empires. Meanwhile, upon hearing Shifeng's teasing, both Yuan Taishan and Purple Jade relaxed visibly. "Guild Leader Black Flame, who are these NPCs behind you?" Yuan Taishan asked. Although he now understood that these Tier 3 NPCs were not hostile, he still couldn't ignore the fact that so many Tier 3 NPCs were gathered in a single place. "Them." Meeting Yuan Taishan's fearful and curious gaze, Shifeng pointed at the Tier 3 NPCs behind him and said, "They belong to my personal knight division. They're similar to the Tier 2 knights you see patrolling outside. Only, the ones behind me have just been promoted to Tier 3. They belong to your knight division?" Although Shifeng had spoken very casually, both Yuan Taishan and Purple Jade were flabbergasted by his words. They might not have a clear idea of what a knight division was, but judging by Shifeng's tone, they could tell that these Tier 3 NPCs were under Shifeng's command. These were several hundred Tier 3 NPCs they were talking about. The various superpowers did not have a lot of personal guards that had been promoted to Tier 3 even now. Normally, only personal guards at the secret silver rank or above had a 100% chance of completing their Tier 3 promotion quest. As for personal guards of a lower rank, their chances were very low. However, secret silver personal guards and better were incredibly rare. Most superpowers had less than a handful of them. Meanwhile, from what Yuan Taishan could tell, there should be at least 500 Tier 3 NPCs standing inside the inner courtyard. With such a force, Zero Wing could annihilate any power it wished. "Right, Elder Yuan, why were you in such a hurry to find me? Do you have some urgent business to discuss?" Shifeng asked when Yuan Taishan remained in a daze even after some time had passed. "I did, originally." Looking at the Tier 3 knights filling the courtyard, Yuan Taishan revealed a bitter smile and said, "But now, it seems I don't anymore." What a joke. Right now, Stone Forest City's defenses were even more frightening than those of a kingdom's capital city. Even if all of the Eastern continent's superpowers worked together and formed an army of several thousand Tier 3 experts, they would still be far from capable of capturing a kingdom's capital city. Needless to say, they wouldn't be capable of capturing Stone Forest City, either. Meanwhile, if the various superpowers couldn't do anything against Stone Forest City, then Zero Wing's foundations would not be affected no matter what. If the various superpowers still insisted on attacking Stone Forest City, the only ones that would suffer would be them. Right now, Yuan Taishan was even hoping that the various superpowers would come and attack Stone Forest City quickly. Following which, Shifeng conducted a transaction for the 12 elemental pillars with Yuan Taishan. Afterward, Shifeng had to admit that the secret pavilion was indeed rich, as Yuan Taishan had purchased 200 sets just to test the magic barrier's efficiency. This transaction had instantly turned Shifeng into a wealthy man again. During the time Shifeng and Yuan Taishan were doing business, the various superpowers received news of Stone Forest City being opened to the public. For a time, the superpowers were surprised by this situation. They never anticipated such a crazy stunt from Zero Wing. Meanwhile, inside the Dragon Phoenix Pavilion's residence in Black Dragon City. Pavilion Master, what do you think Black Flame is trying to do? Martial Dragon asked, his face filled with confusion as he read the report in his hand. Is he really trying to make a quick buck, now that he knows that he is going to lose Stone Forest City? In Martial Dragon's opinion, this was the only explanation for this situation. After all, as soon as the various superpowers finished negotiating a partnership with each other, an army of several thousand Tier 3 experts would march on Stone Forest City. Moreover, once the superpowers allied with each other, they definitely wouldn't be satisfied with just obtaining the 12 elemental pillars. They would surely aim for Stone Forest City and even possibly the entirety of Zero Wing. At that time, it would be useless even if the secret pavilion tried to protect Zero Wing. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. I don't know, but everything is already over. I received news that quite a few superpowers have started negotiating with each other in secret. There is nothing Zero Wing can do to salvage this situation now, Nine Dragons Emperor said, shaking his head. Although he was similarly confused by Shifeng's actions, he deemed this matter no longer important. How are things coming along on Stubborn Heart's side? They are already making their way to Stone Forest City. They have close to 100 Tier 3 experts on their side, and it won't be long before they sneak into the city. Once the various superpowers army arrives, they will coordinate their attacks with the armies, and Stone Forest City should fall very easily, Martial Dragon reported. Good. Your side should get ready, as well. We'll be meeting with Lu Xingluo in a moment. At that time, we'll have to discuss with him how we are going to distribute Stone Forest City's spoils, Nine Dragons Emperor said. Understood. Martial Dragon responded, a rare smile appearing on his face. Meanwhile, as Nine Dragons Emperor was paying Lu Xingluo a visit, Stubborn Heart's group arrived before Stone Forest City's entrance and queued up to enter the city. Chapter 2441, Zero Wing's Tyranny. Chapter 2441, Zero Wing's Tyranny. Stone Forest City's public opening had shaken the Cold Spring Forest. Many expert players and teams within the area had dropped what they were doing and ran toward the city. As a result, a long line had formed outside of the city's entrance. At a glance, one could easily spot over 10,000 players lined up, and the line continued to grow as time passed. Many of the players in line were here to witness the rumored sacred leveling ground in Cold Spring Forest, while a small number were waiting to verify if Stone Forest City had truly opened to the public. Although the system would not lie, nobody was certain that Zero Wing wouldn't just close its city again. After all, Stone Forest City offered a massive number of benefits. A struggle ensued between the various major powers and wealthy players every time Zero Wing held a leasing auction for the city's private houses, and as a result, every house was rented for astronomical sums. If Zero Wing had really opened Stone Forest City to the public, players wouldn't have to rely on renting private houses to enter the city. As long as they paid the entrance fee, they could rest within the city's walls, which would drastically reduce the value of Stone Forest City's private houses. The powers Zero Wing had allied with also paid a certain price to access Stone Forest City, And now that the city was open to the public, those powers wouldn't have to continue paying the guild. Most importantly, by opening Stone Forest City to the public, Zero Wing would be sharing its leveling advantage with outsiders, greatly reducing the advantage the guild held. Hence, closing the city again wouldn't exactly be possible for Zero Wing. Zero Wing's gone mad with greed. It's charging 10 silver per person to enter the city. That's practically daylight robbery, a Tier 3 female cursemancer radiating a dark aura complained, frowning. She wanted nothing more than to slay the Tier 2 NPC knight that collected the entrance fees. Ordinary guild cities only charged several dozen copper as entrance fees. Even the guild cities that had been established near level 100 neutral maps only charged 2 silver per person. Yet, Stone Forest City charged 5 times that. Although current players had already reached very high levels and found more avenues to earn money, they also had to bear more expenditures. When players fought level 100 plus monsters, in particular, their equipment lost durability at an alarming rate, even if they were fully geared in top-tier equipment. As a result, the repair fees were excruciating. Furthermore, players had to purchase potions and tools for grinding. Once these costs were deducted, players could only save a small number of coins each day. Currently, even level 100, Tier 2 experts only made a net profit of 40 or 50 silver per day, and that was limited to ranged experts. Melee experts would be lucky to earn 30 silver each day in net profit. Unless players were extremely lucky and obtained a precious item or material, they wouldn't make much money. Although players could grind low-level monsters for materials and earn more money, doing so was putting the cart before the horse. If the various major powers experts removed themselves from the front line, they'd quickly be left behind. Catching up would be incredibly difficult, and they might even miss some fortuitous opportunity as a result. Hence, no matter how poor frontline players were, they wouldn't walk away from the frontline just to earn a little money. At the moment, players were only entering the city, not renting hotel rooms, yet they had to pay 10 silver per person. If the city charged each player so much to enter the city, it would earn 100,000 gold for every 1 million players. 100,000 gold. At this stage of the game, not even first-rate guilds could earn that much money in a day. Of course, Zero Wing would only earn that much if 1 million players visited the city on a daily basis, but with the advantages Stone Forest City had to offer, attracting 2 or 3 million daily visitors should be a piece of cake. In other words, Stone Forest City could generate 200,000 or 300,000 gold per day in entry fees alone. Moreover, as more players visited Cold Spring Forest, this number would increase. Flower. Now isn't the time to take action. Entering the city is our first priority, Stubborn Heart reminded the female cursemancer from beside her. Once the superpowers, combined army arrives, you can fuss all you want. The cursemancer, Flower Rain, exasperated Stubborn Heart. Flower Rain had already reached Tier 3, and 10 silver was insignificant to an expert of her caliber. She could join any random team and earn several dozen gold, yet she complained about 10 silver coins. If not for this operation, Stubborn Heart wouldn't have recruited an independent expert like Flower Rain. However, he had to admit that Stone Forest City was tyrannical. Just by existing here, the city could earn enough income to sustain several first-rate guilds. Relax, I'm aware of our priorities. That being said, I want 50% more in remuneration, Flower Rain demanded. Despite the fact that Stubborn Heart was the guild leader of the Black Dragon Empire's #1 Dark Guild, she showed him no respect. On the contrary, she demanded a higher price. In response, several of Grim Reaper's Tier 3 experts gave Flower Rain cold glares. Fine. As long as you can maintain your domain as agreed, I'll increase your pay, Stubborn Heart said, assenting. Interestingly, he didn't seem angry in the least. None of the other major powers experts were surprised, however. Flower Rain was the only player in the Black Dragon Empire to possess a Tier 3 domain skill. She was also a bona fide Void Realm expert, and when she activated her domain skill, even the Empire's first-rate guilds were helpless against her. This was precisely the reason that Stubborn Heart had enlisted Flower Rain's help. Although every member of his team was a Tier 3 expert, Stone Forest City was full of level 115 plus, Tier 2 NPC knights, which would be a challenge to get through. Hence, they needed Flower Rain's help. With a Tier 3 domain skill to suppress the knights, defeating the NPCs wouldn't be a problem. Even if a large number of Zero Wings Tier 3 experts joined the fray, they could complete their task and capture the City Lord's mansion. Once Stubborn Heart agreed to her price, Flower Rain stopped wasting time and gave the Tier 2 knight her 10 silver. As Flower Rain entered the city, a Tier 3 berserker beside Stubborn Heart spoke up, "Boss, that's 50%. If you give her that much, we'll have significantly less profit." "It's fine. As long as Nine Dragons Emperor's negotiations with Starlink are successful, and we're the first group to capture the City Lord's mansion, we can negotiate for more. With Stone Forest City under our control, Nine Dragons Emperor and Starlink won't be able to refuse our demands," Stubborn Heart said, grinning as he looked at the long line of players behind him. He had known for a long time that Stone Forest City was a gold mine, but after seeing it for himself, he realized how limited his imagination had been. How was this a gold mine? This was basically a diamond mine. The city could collect over 300,000 gold in entrance fees alone. Once the various superpowers took over, even a small share would greatly benefit Grim Reaper. The other powers Tier 3 experts couldn't help but think the same as they gazed at Stone Forest City with hungry eyes. At the same time, they felt their hatred for Zero Wing grow. Normally, their guilds had to go to great lengths to earn a few thousand gold more than usual, but despite its lack of backers and a short history of less than a year, Zero Wing earned more income than their guilds could dream of. Moreover, Zero Wing earned so much without having to lift a finger. "All right, let's head inside," Stubborn Heart commanded as the players behind him urged their team to move. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU Stubborn Heart and his team then paid their entrance fees and entered Stone Forest City. However, as they crossed the threshold into the city, they found Flower Rain standing stiff as a statue in the middle of the road. "Flower, what's wrong?" Stubborn Heart asked. When he made it to her side, however, he, too, was stunned. His expression shifted to one of horror when he saw the 2 rows of NPC knights before him. "Tier 3? This? How is this possible?" Chapter 2442, Frightening City Guild Leader Heart? Chapter 2442, Frightening City Guild Leader Heart? Stubborn Heart's words and his subsequent pause confused the various major powers Tier 3 experts behind him. They could not understand what had made him stop. So what if there was a Tier 3 NPC guarding the gate? Was that really such a major issue? Currently, every guild city had a few Tier 3 NPCs as guards. Tier 3 NPCs might be very powerful and practically invincible against Tier 3 players one-on-one, but if dozens of Tier 3 experts worked together, they could even take down level 100 mythic bosses, not to mention Tier 3 NPCs. However, when the various major powers Tier 3 experts caught up to Stubborn Heart, they, too, were stunned. What's going on? Why are there so many Tier 3 NPCs? 200 Tier 3 knights stood in 2 neat rows at the end of the road, all wearing pitch-black armor and radiating incredibly powerful auras. The Tier 3 knight captain in the lead radiated such a powerful aura that it felt stifling to the players. The moment these Tier 3 experts appeared, the knights promptly turned toward them, the NPC's asterisk-piercing gaze sending chills down the expert spines. "They won't attack without reason, right?" A Tier 3 assassin nervously muttered. "We haven't done anything yet." Their team had nearly 100 Tier 3 experts and was a force that could even threaten God's domain superpowers, but they were nothing before the 200 Tier 3 NPCs. Those knights could quickly and effortlessly annihilate every one of them. As the various major powers' anxiety spiked, someone shouted at them. "You bunch! Why are you just standing there? This is the city entrance. Players aren't allowed to loiter." The voice shook Stubborn Heart and his companions from their daze, and they spun toward the player shouting at them. They all wanted to know who would be so bold. They spotted a level 102, Tier 2 berserker wearing Zero Wings guild emblem. Tier 3 experts like them would have no issues destroying a Tier 2 berserker. And yet, despite sensing Stubborn Heart and his team's killing intent, the Tier 2 berserker didn't back away. He actually grinned and asked, "What? You want to start a fight here?" The moment the berserker asked that, The Tier 3 knights unsheathed their weapons and scrutinized every move Stubborn Heart's group made. The intensity of their auras more than doubled as they did. This punk, a Tier 3 ranger radiating intense bloodlust, gnashed his teeth as he glared at the arrogant Tier 2 berserker. However, when the ranger saw the Tier 3 knights readying, his scalp went numb. If we were anywhere else, I'd teach him a lesson. As a dark player, he had slain plenty of experts in the fields, including several dozen peak experts from first-rate guilds. With his strength, even the various superpowers had to tread lightly. And yet, a Tier 2 berserker from Zero Wing dared to look down on him. It was humiliating. All right, enough. Let's head inside. This isn't the place for a fight. Stubborn Heart warned the ranger softly, his gaze glued on the Tier 3 knights. They had nearly 100 Tier 3 experts, but if they picked a fight with those knights, the NPCs would annihilate them in under a minute. They had only recently reached Tier 3, while the Tier 3 NPCs had them outmatched in weapons, equipment, and Tier 3 skills and spells. It seems you're morons, after all. Remember, this place is Stone Forest City. This is no place for your shenanigans, the Zero Wing berserker said, nodding in satisfaction as Stubborn Heart obediently led his team into the city. Amazing. Zero Wing's patrol member is so awesome. He even dares to berate Tier 3 expert. It seems Stone Forest City is a different world. If that had happened in any other guild city, that berserker would have died for treating Tier 3 experts so disrespectfully. Of course, Stone Forest City is different. Don't you see those Tier 3 NPCs? If those Tier 3 experts had attacked, none of them would leave the city alive. It seems we won't need to worry about Tier 3 bullies in Stone Forest City. The Tier 2 experts new to Stone Forest City couldn't help but gape after seeing Zero Wing's Tier 2 berserker scold Stubborn Heart's group. They had never thought that Stone Forest City would be that safe. Tier 2 players had to be extremely careful around Tier 3 experts in other guild cities and most NPC cities. Accidentally provoking a Tier 3 expert would seal their fate. It didn't even matter if they had done so in the middle of the city. In Stone Forest City, however, Tier 3 experts couldn't act so arrogantly. They would have to follow the city's laws accordingly. At this stage of the game, Stone Forest City was likely the only guild city in God's domain with such stability and security. This incident gave many Tier 2 players a more optimistic view of the city. Many of them even considered making Stone Forest City their new home and focusing their development around it. No one wanted to reside and develop somewhere unsafe, constantly having to worry about losing whatever treasure they'd obtained, after all. Zero Wing certainly knows how to get the upper hand. It has stationed 200 Tier 3 NPCs at the gate to shock people. It's even used us Tier 3 players as a promotional tool. Flower Rain growled as she glanced back at the Tier 3 knights by the city gates. She then turned to Stubborn Heart, smiling bitterly as she said, "I'm afraid our plans have been foiled, Guild Leader Heart." By stationing so many Tier 3 NPCs by the city's gate, Zero Wing had essentially warned Tier 3 players like them from misbehaving in the city, and there was nothing they could do about it. Those were 200 Tier 3 NPCs they were talking about. Not even 1,000 Tier 3 experts had a chance against such a force. That's not necessarily true. These 200 Tier 3 knights are pretty scary, but the Superpowers combined army has several thousand Tier 3 experts. A measly 200 Tier 3 NPCs can't stop that force, Stubborn Heart said, sneering. Once the army begins the siege, Zero Wing will send its Tier 3 NPCs to defend the city. We can use that opportunity to attack the City Lord's mansion. That's right. Even if Zero Wing sends Tier 3 NPCs to defend the mansion, it won't send many. We still have a chance. The several first-rate guild leaders around Stubborn Heart nodded. Since everyone thinks that the plan is still viable, let's scout the City Lord's mansion. Once the army arrives, we can make our move, Stubborn Heart said. Even after seeing the 200 Tier 3 knights, he refused to give up. They wouldn't get another opportunity like this. Even if Zero Wing was more powerful than he had expected, it couldn't stop the various superpowers' combined might. With their discussion finished, Stubborn Heart and his comrades made their way toward the City Lord's mansion. However, The shock and anxiety they had felt upon entering the city only grew on the way to the mansion. They constantly spotted patrol squads led by more Tier 3 NPCs. These patrol squads might not have been very large, with only 3 Tier 3 knights among the 12-man squads, but they had encountered more than 30 patrol squads. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Once they reached the City Lord's mansion, Stubborn Heart and his team fell into utter despair. They found another 200 Tier 3 knights guarding the City Lord's mansion and surrounding area. Moreover, the several Tier 3 knights leading the patrol were no weaker than the Tier 3 knight captain they had seen by the city gate. Guild leader, are we still proceeding with the plan? A Tier 3 assassin asked when he saw Stubborn Heart's dazed look. Are you stupid? Tell Nine Dragons Emperor he can do whatever he wants, but Grim Reaper is out. Stubborn Heart snapped, rolling his eyes. Stone Forest City had over 500 Tier 3 NPCs and over 200 high-leveled Tier 2 NPCs. How were they supposed to fight such a force? Chapter 2443, Unshakable Zero-Wing Dark Knight Empire, Dark Knight City. Chapter 2443, Unshakable Zero-Wing Dark Knight Empire, Dark Knight City. Starlink's residence, which should have been prosperous and lively, was extraordinarily quiet. A large number of Starlink's experts stood guard outside the guild hall. There were even Tier 3 experts among them. Not even guild members were allowed in the guild hall, much less outsiders. It was an unprecedented level of security. Only 3 people were currently in the guild hall: Lu Xingluo, Nine Dragons Emperor, and an unknown player wearing a cloak. Since the third member of the group had hidden their identity with a black cloak, it was even impossible to tell whether the player was male or female. Not only was Nine Dragons Emperor unhappy about the third member's concealment during such a crucial meeting, but he was also shocked by how respectfully Lu Xingluo treated the third member of their party. Lu Xingluo led Starlink, a guild that had the power to develop on both main continents simultaneously. Although Starlink wasn't as powerful as a super guild, it had even more potential than ordinary super guilds. And yet, Lu Xingluo was letting someone lord above him. It was unbelievable. Now that we've concluded our discussion, does your side have any problems? Lu Xingluo asked Nine Dragons Emperor. None. Those people should be inside Stone Forest City by now. Once the combined army lays siege to Stone Forest City, they'll use everything they have to secure the City Lord's mansion. Once they've done their job, our alliance will have an advantage in the negotiations with the various superpowers, Nine Dragons Emperor confidently replied. To capture Stone Forest City and topple Phoenix Reign from her pedestal, Nine Dragons Emperor had invested much in this upcoming operation. He had even offered huge concessions to the Black Dragon Empire's dark forces and gathered nearly 100 Tier 3 experts. He had vetted the experts thoroughly, ensuring that they were in no way connected to other superpowers. With this, he wouldn't have to worry about Zero Wing stopping the group outside of Stone Forest City. Zero Wing's relationship with the various superpowers was quite tense, after all. No one would be surprised if the guild denied entry to members of non-allied superpowers. However, Zero Wing would lose public favor if it didn't allow these Tier 3 experts, who weren't associated with the various superpowers, into the city. By doing so, it would upset the various ordinary powers Tier 3 experts and independent Tier 3 experts. If that happened, the guild's situation would become even more precarious. Not only would it have to face the various superpowers, but it would also have to worry about the game's ordinary powers and independent experts. As Nine Dragons Emperor finished his statement, the mysterious player beside him received a message. Nine Dragons Emperor watched the cloaked player's atmosphere change as they read it. Although he couldn't see the mysterious person's appearance, he was more than capable of sensing someone's emotional shifts as a peak expert. Dragon Pavilion Master, you've worked hard for this, but I'm afraid that Starlink will be withdrawing from the operation, the mysterious person declared without bothering to discuss the situation with Lu Xingluo. What do you mean? The declaration confused Nine Dragons Emperor. Have you given up on Stone Forest City? They had already laid the groundwork to cut off Stone Forest City's profits. They were only waiting for the various superpowers' combined army to siege the city, yet this mysterious person had suddenly decided that Starlink would stay out of the fight. This cloaked player had to be toying with him. The announcement stunned Lu Xingluo, as well. He couldn't understand why the mysterious person had chosen to forsake the opportunity to secure a gold mine like Stone Forest City. No, I simply doubt this operation's chances of success, the mysterious person explained, shaking their head. How can it fail? I admit that Zero Wing is very strong, but it's nothing compared to the various superpowers joint army. Once my people secure the City Lord's mansion, Stone Forest City will be ours for the taking. Nine Dragons Emperor snarled, furious. I don't mind allying with the other superpowers if Starlink intends to give up, but you'd better not regret your decision. Regret? The mysterious person could not help but chuckle. If you think you can find a new partner, Dragon Pavilion Master, feel free, but I'm sure that no superpower in God's domain will want to work with you. Just as Nine Dragons Emperor was about to argue, he received a message from Martial Dragon. The message was simple: Stubborn Heart and the others have abandoned their partnership. Nine Dragons Emperor could only stare at the message, dumbfounded. What, exactly, had happened? As soon as Starlink gave up on their alliance, Stubborn Heart's group had informed him of the same. Was Zero Wing so heaven-defyingly powerful that it had bought off both groups? Nine Dragons Emperor couldn't think of another explanation for the sudden development. This was an excellent chance to capture Stone Forest City. Why would anyone ignore such temptation? Don't overthink things. The reason we've decided against this operation is simple. As if the mysterious person had read Nine Dragons Emperor's mind, they calmly continued, no power in God's domain can do anything against Stone Forest City. How is that possible? Nine Dragons Emperor instinctively refuted the idea. Even if Black Flame and the Secret Pavilion are protecting the city, they can't stop several thousand Tier 3 experts. But what if the city is protected by 500 Tier 3 NPCs? The mysterious person asked. 500 Tier 3 NPCs? That? Impossible. How can Zero Wing possibly have so many Tier 3 NPCs? Not even Kingdom's capital cities are protected by so many Tier 3 NPCs. Nine Dragons Emperor shouted. He was now sure that this mysterious player had to be messing with him. If you don't believe me, take a look for yourself, the mysterious person said, and they sent Nine Dragons Emperor a recording from inside Stone Forest City. By the time Nine Dragons Emperor finished the video, he was dazed. The recording included two segments. The first half showed 200 Tier 3 NPCs guarding Stone Forest City's entrance, while the second half displayed the 200 Tier 3 NPCs patrolling around the City Lord's mansion. Although he wasn't there in person, Nine Dragons Emperor could sense the NPCs' incredible pressure. Those knights could even eliminate an army of several thousand Tier 3 experts. Meanwhile, news quickly reached the various superpowers, including Twilight City's Dragon Phoenix Pavilion. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, a guild city that's protected by over 500 Tier 3 NPCs. Isn't guild leader Black Flame a little too impressive? Who would dare attack Stone Forest City now? Blue Phoenix's jaw dropped when she heard about Stone Forest City's knights. Not even an NPC Kingdom's army could stand against 500 Tier 3 NPCs. It's no wonder why he didn't mind revealing the 12 elemental pillars. The various superpowers will have to consider their next move carefully. If they act rashly, they'll be the next to be eliminated from the competition, Phoenix Rain said, a bitter smile forming on her face as she read her subordinate's report. Not only did Zero Wing possess the 12 elemental pillars, but it had also proven strong enough to safeguard the advanced ancient barrier scrolls. As of today, the Eastern continent's status quo would undergo a huge shift. As Phoenix Rain marveled at Zero Wing's foundations, a Tier 3 assassin knocked on her office door and entered the room. The assassin then reported, Phoenix Pavilion Master, the Great Pavilion Master requests your presence to discuss an important matter. You're tuning in to the Celestial War YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories,